For education in the early 1900s, segregation was a hot topic among Supreme Court decisions and individual schools. After abolishing slavery, society was trying to figure out a way that both African Americans and white individuals could live together freely. This is when the big idea of separate but equal came into the equation. In 1890, Louisiana passed the first Jim Crow law that required separate accommodations for whites and blacks. This eventually led to the passing of Plessy versus Ferguson, which authorized segregation and provided justification for Jim Crow laws in southern states. This forced separate accommodations for many different things, such as public water fountains, bathrooms, diners, and finally schools, forcing white students and students of color to be educated in totally different environments. The education between the two groups of students was completely unequal and provided more opportunities for white students at that time. But doesn't that sound familiar? The same exact statement could be made about the modern state of education today. But one might ask themselves, hasn't there been huge steps towards equality since that time? In 1954, the Supreme Court completely overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and declared that separate schools were inherently unequal. This is where the paradox of segregation becomes apparent. One would assume that schools are completely equal, but the high concentration of minority students in high-poverty schools continues to add contradictory features to our growth in racial equality. One can visually see this in graphs representing race in low and high-poverty schools, and if one continues to investigate, they would see many examples of these contradictory features. In the early 1900s, African American schools reported having leaking roofs, sagging floors, and windows without glass. Well, if one visits a high-poverty school, such as ones in Detroit today, they would see some of the same conditions. African Americans also had a major problem with a lack of representation and funding. In modern times, one can see the same situation from the nearly all-white education profession, and in the national average of high-poverty schools spending $1,200 less per student. Even the number of African American students who complete high school is similar to the early 1900s. Although averages and dropout rates have been declining, there has always been a gap between white students and minority students for dropping out. Now, what about the schools where the population of each race is even? Do they still show the same trends? Well, let's look at the School of Marietta, where the ethnic makeup is nearly equal amongst races. Although this is the ideal situation, there is still segregation within the school. When one walks down the hallways of the mathematics department, they can visually see which classes are advanced solely based on the ethnicity of the students within. This is first-hand evidence of the paradox of segregation. We have fought for decades for desegregation and racial equality, and we have earned these ideals through law. But why is segregation still at large within the classroom? Is there some hidden aspect that fosters the education of white students while hindering the education of minorities? Some of the students within Marietta explain the racial separation. They explain that society expects white students to succeed and minority students to merely skate by in education. And many of the minority students explain that their shortcomings were much due to the intimidation they feel from their white peers. But if we have fought and won so many battles for desegregation and equality, then why can't we foster education for all races today? Kamu Bob explained that to earn racial equality in the classroom, it is more than just putting minority students next to white students. We have to adopt the idea that all students can achieve and reflect our ideas through our actions in the classroom. If we do more than just create diverse populations and actually foster intrinsic motivation for all of our students, then maybe one day this educational paradox of segregation will no longer be a paradox and will be a living result of a long battle won through racial equality.